Good morning, members. I'm going to start off this agenda item with the discussion of legislative subpoena power contempt. Particularly, we're going to talk about it as it relates to Colonel Reeves' failure to produce documents that this committee has requested. Thank you. On Tuesday, March 29th, committee staff sent an email with a request for documents to Mr. Louis Oglesby via his assistant, Lisa Westmoreland, requesting the written journals and similar documents of retired Colonel Reeves as discussed in the committee meeting held on March 15th. We gave him a due date of Tuesday, April 5th at noon to return the documents. We received, on that date, on April 5th, received an email with a letter from Louis Oglesby via Westmoreland that he would be out of town on depositions and could not review and until respond until at least Wednesday, April 13th. On April 13th, we received an email with a letter attached from Louis Oglesby via his secretary stating that Colonel Reeves will not disclose his personal written journals, and we have no, in quotations, Ronald Green document. Then on Tuesday, April 19th, 2022, we issued a subpoena to Colonel Reeves through his counsel, Mr. Oglesby, and it was properly served by the Chief Sergeant of Arms and signed by his assistant on Tuesday, April 19th at 2:58 p.m. With a due date to appear and produce by 12 o'clock on the 26th day of April 22nd, the written journals and similar documents of retired Colonel Reeves. The place of production was listed as 900 North Street, 12th floor, Baton Rouge, Louisiana 70802. I want to first note that Mr. Oglesby was communicating with House staff and knew what the proper procedure was. It was listed on the subpoena itself, and he knew where to send documents as he had been sending documents to House staff. Then Mr. Oglesby called after the deadline of returning the subpoena and asked to discuss the journals with me. I had a discussion with him. We made an agreement that I would go to his office and we would review the journals together and make a decision on what was to be produced. That meeting was held on Monday, May 2nd at his office. During that discussion, he showed me documents that he thought were related to Ronald Green, even though his previous response said that he had no Ronald Green documents in quotes. I wanted to review the rest of the journals that were 3 in number. And he briefly allowed me to start reviewing them. When I got to certain pages in the journal, he refused to produce those documents as I thought they may be related to the committee staff. At that point, we ended our meeting. And then on Monday, May 2nd, his secretary faxed over his pre-selected journal entries to my district office, not the Capitol. And then on Thursday, May 5th, at 10:55 a.m., committee staff received an email from his secretary of the same documents. So as we stand today, we have yet to receive the documents that we requested, that we subpoenaed. We've seen a partial amount as decided by Mr. Oglesby. And as we sit here today, he's never actually complied with the subpoena. He's never produced the documents to this body until May 5th via fax, and it was, again, only partial. So what I'm recommending is this committee was created to investigate the facts and circumstances during the subsequent arrest and death of Ronald Green. We've been empowered to conduct legislative oversight of Louisiana State Police and exercise our legislative duties. The Louisiana Constitutions and the rules of the House grant this special committee the power to issue a subpoena and punish for contempt. This committee has issued numerous subpoenas to compel the testimony of witnesses and the production of documents needed for the investigation. On April 19th of this year, a subpoena was issued to retired Colonel Reeves to appear and produce by noon on April 26th his written journals and similar documents that are necessary to corroborate the statements concerning his actions and the actions of other persons with respect to the investigation of the arrest and death of Ronald Green. Mr. Reeves has failed to appear and produce the requested documents as ordered by the committee by the deadline required by the subpoena. It is my opinion that this committee should hold Colonel Reeves in contempt for his failure to produce and his failure to appear and produce and hold him in contempt. As the chair of this committee, I will introduce a House resolution to ratify the action of this committee. Once introduced, the resolution will be referred by the Speaker to the House and Governmental Affairs Committee, at which time Mr. Reeves will be afforded the notice and opportunity to present a defense to the committee as to why he has not produced the documents. If the House and Government Affairs Committee reports the resolution will be scheduled and a final adoption for the House floor. So I'm opening it up to discussion, or that members of the committee, if they have any questions for the chair, I'll be happy to answer them at this time. Representative Bacala.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of quick questions. Has there been any contention that the journals are not public documents?
I've not. Mr. Unglesby said by letter that they were private. By review of pretty much everybody who looked at it, no one really agrees with that contention. And the documents I believe he produced clearly demonstrate meeting notes with public officials, and I don't see any credible.
Okay. Well, my second question was going to be if they were in fact public records, was there any contention that certain entries were exempt from review? As I think 14.3 describes some of that, but obviously that is not the case if the argument is that they are not public records. So right now that would be the argument being proposed.
And look, we offered in the spirit of cooperation and the spirit of limiting to the focus of Ronald Green to go to review with Mr. Unglesby when I went over there and redact anything that we thought was obviously sensitive information or sensitive to any kind of thing. But this committee has never sought to get anything outside the scope of what this committee is set up for. And so we've always been willing to redact, keep under seal like we've done with other documents during this investigation.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Representative Villio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, a review of the testimony of Colonel Reeves would reflect that based on his testimony, those journals are public record. I requested at the first meeting that they be subpoenaed. It would be my position that I'm not looking for redacted copies of the journal at this point. I believe that the entire journal from May 10th, 2019 forward should be produced.
And I agree with you. We were trying to be as cooperative as we could be and as sensitive as we could be to the nature of everything.
I understand.
And we didn't want to look like we were being unreasonable.
I understand.
Representative Landry.
Mr. Chairman, to the extent you know, if Colonel Reeves continues to refuse to hand this over and this goes to a court and the judge orders him to produce it and he doesn't, do you know what the ramifications for him would be?
That's a great question, Representative Landry. At first, what we're going to do is I'm going to move in a second for the committee to find Mr. Reeves in contempt. I'm going to make a second motion that the House of Representatives impose a civil fine of Mr. Reeves. My suggested amount is $5,000, but I'm open to discussion, and it's just my suggested amount. If y'all want to go up, down, I'm willing to entertain both that, and then if it goes through the process, we will have a civil fine of $5,000 to Mr. Reeves, and then there we can also turn it over to the District Attorney's Office for prosecution.
That was my question. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. There's no more discussion. I'm going to go ahead and move that this committee finds Mr. Reeves in contempt. Is there any objection to that motion? Seeing no objection, this committee moves to hold Mr. Reeves in contempt. My second motion is to recommend that the House of Representatives impose a civil fine of Mr. Reeves in the amount of $5,000. Is there any discussion on the amount or any objection to the amount? Seeing no objection, this committee will recommend that the House of Representatives impose a civil fine of Mr. Reeves in the amount of $5,000.